Welcome, everyone. Ready for another deep dive?
Absolutely. Always ready to explore.
Today, we're tackling a pretty big one. God's forgiveness.
Yeah, that's a concept that's been wrestled with for, well, centuries, probably.
Feels like it sometimes, right?
Yeah.
And we've got some really powerful stuff to work with today. We've got that intense verse from Romans,
Romans 8.3839, yeah.
that one. And then, of course, we've got the story, the parable of the prodigal son.
Classic.
So our mission today is to unpack these a bit. See if we can understand better how to really grasp and experience this forgiveness. It's supposed to be limitless, right? But that can be tough to wrap our heads around sometimes.
Definitely not always easy. But that's why we're here, I guess, to dig in and try to make sense of it all.
Exactly. So let's jump right in. Let's start with Romans, that verse. It's basically saying nothing can separate us from God's love.
Right. It's pretty bold. It lists out all these things like hardship, distress, persecution, famine, nakedness, danger, sword.
Yeah, it's like a laundry list of terrible things. And it's saying none of it, nothing can come between us and God's love.
Powerful stuff.
Powerful, but honestly, sometimes my own past, my own mistakes, those feel like a pretty huge barrier. Does that make sense?
Oh, absolutely. I think a lot of people feel that. We carry the weight of those things, those choices we made. And it's hard to believe that forgiveness can just erase all that.
So how do we square that,
Yeah.
that feeling with what this verse is saying?
It's interesting, right? Because the verse points to something that's, well, frankly, pretty hard for us to grasp. It's the idea that God's love isn't something we earn. It's not conditional on us being good enough. It's just there. Always.
Unconditional love.
Yeah.
Easier said than believed sometimes.
Yeah, it can be. It goes against our human logic in a lot of ways. We're so
Yeah.
used to the idea of earning things, proving ourselves worthy.
Right, like we have to earn love.
But this verse, it throws all that out the window. It tells us that God's love isn't based on our actions. It's just a fundamental truth about who God is.
And that kind of reminds me of the prodigal son, right?
How so?
Well, that son, he really messed up. He squandered everything.
He did. Took his inheritance, ran off, lived recklessly, and ended up, well, basically in a pigsty.
Yeah, the whole 9 yards. But the thing is, when he comes crawling back, his father doesn't hesitate. He doesn't even let the son finish his apology. He just runs to him, throws a party.
That's right. It's not just forgiveness. It's this outpouring of joy, of celebration.
It's like he was waiting for him to come home.
Exactly. And that's the thing about this parable. It shows us that God isn't waiting to punish us. He's waiting to welcome us back. He's longing for reconciliation.
It's almost like he's more ready to forgive us than we are to accept it.
I think that's a really good point. And it's something our source material really brings out, that we tend to hold on to guilt and shame even when forgiveness is offered.
Right. It's like we feel like we need to punish ourselves, like we don't deserve to just be happy and free.
It's very human. We build these walls around ourselves thinking we need to be perfect before we can approach God.
So how do we break down those walls? If we're so used to this idea of earning everything, even forgiveness, how do we step into this unconditional love that's being offered?
Honestly, it's a process, a journey. There's no magic formula. But maybe this deep dive, these words, this imagery, it can be a starting point, a shifting perspective.
It's about realizing we're not starting from scratch.
Yeah.
Right? That forgiveness is already there.
Exactly. And that changes everything. It changes how we see ourselves, how we see our past, how we relate to God.
So I guess the question for all of us listening is, what does that change look like in your life?
Yeah.
What would it mean to truly embrace God's forgiveness?
And how would that freedom from guilt that's mentioned in Romans, how would that freedom change how you live, how you love, how you see the world?
Heavy stuff to think about.
It's definitely something to ponder.
Well, thank you for diving into this with me today. Really appreciate it.
My pleasure. Always a good conversation.
And to everyone listening, keep thinking about this. Explore this idea of God's forgiveness. It's a journey worth taking.